this could be handled better. I have to say, the issue now, what everyone's discussing all over the world, in the Paris talks, in Washington, in Cairo, is how to compel Hamas. What does Hamas really want? Are there differences between political Hamas and Yahya Sinwar in the tunnels? There isn't enough pressure on Hamas, and Israel partly is responsible for this. Right now the pressure's on Israel because of the damage done to civilians in Gaza. That can be flipped around. If Israel were more successful and aggressive and clear in messaging that the war could be ended immediately. The fears of famine, the fears of disease, all of that could go instantly if Hamas agrees to hand the Strip back over to the PA, have the leadership go into exile, and hand over the hostages. It could end immediately. In other words, it's reasonable for Israel at this point to demand a surrender. And the fact that it doesn't even bother to message this point is nothing short of shocking. Because if it did, I do believe most of the world, including the Arab world, would support Israel's terms of surrender. For that, of course, Netanyahu has to agree that indeed, in one form or another, it will be handed back to the PA. And he can't do this for fear of Ben Gvir. This is the price Israel pays for the nature of the government currently in power. But it is strategically debilitating. And the result is there's no pressure on Hamas because there's no apparent day after plan. And the pressure is all on Israel. It's unfair, but partly self-inflicted.
It does not really present or bode well for the future as far as the options go. Dan, I'm going to extend our view a little bit beyond just this border, just this set of circumstances. That is, of course, the involvement of other Iranian proxies and, of course, coalition forces. The United States and Britain carrying out massive military strikes overnight against Houthi-controlled sites in Yemen. Break down the situation with all the various Iranian proxy militias and armies in the region.
Well, we're asked, not just Israel is asked, the Western world, indeed the world is asked to accept something totally outrageous, that countries around the region host militias that have either their own agendas or are beholden to Iran, whose goal is to destabilize the region, and generally a combination of both. And this is somehow treated as a normal state of affairs. This means Israel is surrounded by failed states. This means key territorial elements of the Middle East, including that which controls the access to the Suez Canal, which determines the state of Egypt's economy, are controlled by non-state players. This absolutely has to end. The world should make Lebanon its own problem and not let Israel handle it alone. It is outrageous that there are 50,000 strong militia in southern Lebanon that basically acts as a state within a state, and no one talks about how that's a problem. Resolution 1701, passed in 2006, which was passed by the Lebanese parliament, which included politicians affiliated with Hezbollah, spoke not only of a withdrawal of Hezbollah from the border, but also of a return to a normal state of affairs in Lebanon, where a monopoly of authority and of power and of weapons is in the hands of the government. This may involve some unpleasant things, like allowing Hezbollah to be folded into the Lebanese army. But at least then, the country of Lebanon would indeed be a country. Its government would be responsible for its territory. And if they chose war with Israel, then they would have war with Israel. But we wouldn't have this lunatic situation where to hit back at the militia involves hitting at a country that denies that the militia is its responsibility. This really can't continue. It applies to Lebanon as well as to the Houthis.
If you have a militia, you can strike a weapons convoy going to a militia with deniability. You do not have that ability to strike a weapons convoy going to a legitimate Hezbollah government, for example, of Lebanon, without backlash.
Well, I mean, it won't be all that legitimate, but at least it'll be clear. You can certainly demand of Lebanon that it not act like Israel's enemy. And if it did, then you would have a normal style war with a neighboring country. I don't think they choose it, by the way. I don't. But what you currently have is a state of affairs where Israel has no party to turn to because it doesn't deal with Hezbollah, and Beirut, A, doesn't really talk to Israel, B, says we're not responsible, but they are responsible. Listen, to fix Lebanon would involve a lot of things, not just the removal of Hezbollah, but massive aid to enable them to absorb the 2 million or so Syrian refugees, which at this point are about a quarter of the country and probably aren't going back, and also a lot of state building capacity. I do believe that Lebanon's main patron, France, should be involved. The EU should be involved. And the fixing of Lebanon and the creating of a genuine incentive to address Hezbollah and to create political pressure on Hezbollah to essentially lay down its arms in exchange for a share in power of a legitimate country, annoying but necessary. That should be the world's problem. Otherwise, we have here a tinderbox that will explode.
I mean, the question is, would they even take it? But that's a question for another time. Dan, thank you very much for breaking things down.